At the PTC, we strongly advocate that we are musicians first and then we are pianists. Now, when we are actually faced with the keyboard, the technical aspect does become very important for us to be able to express the music that we wish to. Now, I always tell my students, well, flautists, violinists, they all hold their instruments, even cellists would cradle their instruments, whereas with the piano, we have this massive instrument ahead of us, and the only contact point that we have, really, say for the pedal perhaps, but really the only contact points are our fingertips. This is all it is. So how we approach the keys with our fingertips become very important indeed. One of our principal tutors, Ilga, actually talks about imagining cat's paws, where cat's paws, if you imagine, they're very relaxed, furry and very nice, but when the claws come out, they're very, very strong indeed. But the rest of the paws, quite relaxed. And this leads to the other element, relaxation. Now, this term may be a little overused nowadays, but it's still extremely important to gain that control as well. Finding the state of relaxation. This is an exercise that we can all do. Sit at the edge of chairs or piano stools or anything, and with young students, or any students really, you may need permission, but hold their arm up, and if you let go, it should fall straight down again. So this is the state of relaxation. If you find that you let go and the arm stays, then obviously there is excess tension happening at this point. So really, when you let go, it should just dangle down. Once we get that, the next stage becomes finding the minimum amount of tension. Now, of course, if we're completely relaxed, I always say we're beyond the floor. So we are actually employing tension when we're actually playing the piano. So finding that minimum amount of tension to bring the arm out onto above the keys, just that minimum amount is important to find that balance. Really not too much, just enough so that the arm is up here. We use these muscles here on the side as well, just so that we are actually floating above the keys. Then we look at the fingertips. So that's the first stage of relaxation and the minimum amount of tension to bring the hands, the arms and the elbows into play. Then we look at the fingertips, so the cat's paws. Imagining that is certainly useful, and there are books and all sorts of articles written nowadays about how to approach this. The one thing that I find works very well is to imagine the shape of a tunnel. I always, particularly with the young pupils that I have, I would say, well, the tunnels that trains go through, they're always shaped like this. Now, why do you think this is? And I liken the finger shape to the shape of the tunnel, and we always talk about, because it's very strong, this shape gives strength, and that's how they build the trains, the tunnels in this way. The modern ones perhaps not, but the old-fashioned ones, they were like this because it gave strength. Even the arches that we see in some of the historic bridges, the same thing, it gives that strength. So I get them to press from above the book. Now, if I have a rather well-built, strong pupil, then I do actually cheat, and I put my hand under here just for that extra support. But essentially the point is that if they really try to push from above, that it doesn't collapse. And then I actually deliberately show a more of a collapsed shape here. If you imagine the fingertips being collapsed like this, and then in this sort of shape, I get them to press from above, and just as it happens, the book would fall onto the floor. Some of them get a little bit apologetic, but obviously this is rather deliberate, that if the fingers are collapsed, we don't gain that strength. So finding that relaxation, the state of relaxation, but just keeping the fingertips firm. That's one of the control that we need to gain. And of course the bridges and the knuckles are important as well, the columns, so they also need to be strong. We can get baseballs, tennis balls, something to show the good shape that we want to maintain. But one of the things, of course, is that we can talk about this, but it's quite useful and quite, in fact, crucial to explain why we need this. I do remember when I was about 5, when I started piano lessons, when I was learning, my teacher would say finger shape, and I couldn't quite understand why I had to do the finger shapes. I didn't really like it at all. So it's very important to explain why it's important. And I find if we go through the period with the Baroque, the classical, romantic, impressionism, all the way to the contemporary, that the fingers do get flatter and flatter as we go. The Baroque, we do need that clarity. Now, with the clavichords or the harpsichords, I always feel that it's not necessary to mimic the sound of these instruments, but important to be able to have that sound in the ear. So if we are doing a bit of Bach, very important to have that clarity. Same with the classical repertoire. Say, for example, Mozart's version. And then if the fingers are collapsed, we don't get that clarity. We don't get that clarity if the fingertips are not strong. Same thing goes for the knuckles, of course. We don't want this to give way either. So nothing should be collapsed. Well, we don't really need the arm weight just yet, but everything, the impact should go all the way to the tip. So that's one important aspect. And then we move on to something like the Romantic period. Beethoven, of course, the early works, still under the influence of Haydn, Mozart, the classical repertoire. But then we move on to the heroic period. We do have something like... And at this stage, certainly I would be employing a slightly flatter finger shape. And certainly by the time we play a bit of Chopin, out and really feel that the fingers are now at the extension of the arm, I would employ a fairly, if anything, completely flat finger to maximize the amount of contact we have with the keys. So this would be a much more different approach, and we look at Debussy, and certainly by this time we would have a much flatter, but still we do need the clarity at times, but generally a much flatter approach. And then by the contemporary, we actually do need both. In fact, we do need both throughout. Certainly with Chopin, there's the Polish language, the sound of the Polish language has suddenly come in, and you do need that fingertip for the clarity as well. And on the other hand, even when we're looking at the Baroque repertoire, that's quite Baroque or actually Rachmaninoff, but certainly when we want to sing out, we still need the flat fingertips. To get the instrument to sing out. So we do actually need both throughout the repertoire, but generally, certainly the clarity in the early period is crucial. And these are the sort of things, it doesn't have to be these classical repertoire, but it's very useful to demonstrate why the control and the fingertips are very important. So these are aspects, just a little bit from me, that we can introduce into our own playing as well as our teaching, as we look at the control and the relaxation and that the minimum amount of tension. So that's something to look into as well as everything else that is involved in piano playing. Thank you very much for watching.